My guest is Eddie Lewis, and Eddie was a longtime U.S. men's national team soccer player, played in a couple of World Cups, and we're out here at TOCA Social, which is his place, and TOCA Social is part of a broader TOCA ecosystem. What's interesting is when he played in college, it's where it kind of got the genesis for it. So tell us the different parts of your TOCA empire, if you will.
Sure.
And how that inspiration in college fed into it.
Yeah, well, TOCA today is, we call ourselves a soccer experiences company. And there's two brands. There's TOCA Soccer and there's TOCA Social. TOCA Social here, as you know, it's a full entertainment experiences, family fun, built around soccer. And TOCA Soccer we're the largest operator of indoor soccer centers in North America. We have 38 venues. We have kids programs in the morning, TOCA training in the afternoon, which I'll talk a little bit about, leagues in the evening traditionally. So we're really excited about both brands. But to your point, the genesis and really TOCA training was built out of my own necessities as a player. I was at UCLA. I was a very late recruit. Had potential but was very raw. I played a lot of sports growing up but didn't focus on soccer until very late, so it was always like searching for a way to kind of catch up to all the best players, technically. And our locker room was inside a Poly Pavilion, so a lot of times we'd kind of sit and watch the basketball team train before we'd go out for practice. And they rolled out these smaller than regulation size hoops one time, and the idea was these guys are going to work on their three-point shots on the smaller hoop, which obviously in the game would make it a lot easier. So I thought, all right, that's a good concept. And I went home and kind of in the parking garage next to my apartment, I grabbed a tennis ball and just started throwing it against the wall and trying to control this tennis ball that was obviously much harder. And I'd throw it 30 or 40 times, a car would come, and that would kind of be it. But after a couple of weeks, I noticed an improvement. And I thought, all right, I'm onto something here, so let's find a way to ramp this up. So I saved up some money and bought a used portable tennis ball machine and a ton of tennis balls, and basically would wedge myself in these industrial parks in the corner to kind of contain the balls and just start firing balls and working on things that were hard to work on in practice because I didn't want to give the ball away. And it was difficult to get those kind of like services, balls out of the air, my weak foot, all these different parts of my game. And I just started to, I'd get 1,000 reps in an afternoon sometimes, like, 6 months worth of practice in one afternoon with bringing it down with my chest and going in a direction. And that was it. I just started catching everyone up and starting to blow by people. And I thought, okay, this is like, for me, this is a game changer. So that was really, the genesis, and it would go on to, I think it's the reason why I ended up in Europe, how I got drafted in the MLS. And obviously the day I retired, really began focusing on how do I make this training concept more soccer specific, obviously, but this smaller ball, lots of repetitions, kind of controlled environment. And when I looked around, golf had a driving range, baseball had batting cages. Like, this concept already existed, but for soccer there wasn't anything.
So we did a docuseries called Raising Her Game. It charts the rise of soccer in this country alongside the rise of women's sports through the University of Texas women's soccer team. And one of the things we talked about in this is how the college path is a pretty normal one into the pros for the women's side. On the men's side, doing what Eddie did, coming out of college, going and playing Europe, playing for the national team, is less common. What to you are some of the advantages maybe of taking the path you did?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, listen, I played in Europe for 10 years and I saw a ton of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds that turned pro. And the one thing college offers is it also teaches you how to grow up and be an adult and be more responsible. And a lot of these kids, 16, 17, were starting to make a bunch of money, but didn't really have a lot to offer outside of soccer practice. And they would end up struggling and falling out of the game because they hadn't really matured the same way that college helps you do that as a young man or as a young woman. And now with some of the changes that are happening in college, with the spring season that's being allowed, I'm a huge fan of using college as a real development pathway for players. Not all players, but certainly there's many more players, in my opinion, that should play college before they turn pro, even if it's for a few years, just because of the education, the social environment, the maturity that comes along with it. I mean, these are world-class facilities that are being offered. You know, in a lot of cases, you know, these college facilities are better than a lot of professional ones. So I'm a huge fan of the college game, and I'm hoping, you know, more and more players start to get back to using that as a pipeline.
The bit about the facilities is exactly what we heard from some of the UT players we talked to. Another guy we talked to was a predecessor of yours on the men's national team, which was Eric Ronaldo. Yeah, and he talked a little bit about the men's game and the women's game, and about how the '99 women's team had this galvanizing effect on soccer for not just the women's side. What was your perception coming up at that time of what that women's team did for the sport in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say beyond just soccer, that team like opened the door for women's sports in general, right? And I think since then, both soccer as well as the growth of many other women's sports, you know, haven't really looked back. I think the thing that's really interesting now is, for me, the growth that we're seeing almost outside of the U.S. in women's soccer. I mean, these countries are exploding. You know, I left England in 2008, and my daughter hadn't played soccer once because girls weren't allowed to play or really on teams. You know, in Spain, they were like, that was almost an insult if girls played soccer. And whatever, a couple of years ago, Spain wins the World Cup. You know, so I think the progress that these European nations are making in such a short period of time by applying a lot of, you know, the same foundations and principles they had on the men's side, you know, it's really all, you know, off the backs of the success of the teams here. But I think it's going to be, you know, it's going to be harder for the women's team to continue to be successful. But I think it does so much for women's soccer, you know, globally. And, you know, for me, I think it's a real tribute to that group.
How exciting is it then for you to have both men's and women's soccer have this popularity that they didn't have when you were there, such that you can have a place like TOCA Social?
Yeah, I mean, TOCA Social, forever. We had a few venues in the UK, and I said, we have to get this to America. We have to get this in America. And people said, well, you know, I don't know the soccer culture in America. I said, listen, there's going to be families that come into TOCA Social, and the mom is going to be the best soccer player in the family. And, you know, you don't get that anywhere else in the world. So, like, there's so many soccer fans and players that want to be a part of this that aren't just, you know, your typical soccer demographic, if you will, globally, that I knew this place was going to be a smash, you know, before we ever opened the doors. And, you know, it's been nothing but that since. And, you know, again, it's a great reflection of, you know, a mom or a sister or whoever that can come into this venue and kind of show off their skills to the family as the best soccer player in the group.
Amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Eddie. Appreciate it. We're looking forward to seeing some of those skills. And with Eddie Lewis, I'm Rush Olson.
Awesome.